going on, guys? Welcome back to NBA Previews. Today, we're discussing the San Antonio Spurs. Got my main man, Matt Hanifan, with me. Matt, Spurs went 22-60 last year. Obviously, it was Victor Wembanyama's first year. And they made a little bit of noise in free agency, barring how you feel about said moves, or maybe like the main move we're probably going to discuss in a little bit. But Matt, I want to see how you're doing first. I want to see how things are. And yeah, like the NBA's, by the time this video gets out, the NBA has already been a couple days old. Oh, the NBA season has been a couple days old at this point. So how you feeling? How you feeling with basketball being back? How you feel about like some of the games you've seen so far?
I'm doing great. It's very good to have basketball on my TV again, even though I watched my Heat get absolutely curb stomped by the Orlando Magic. But that's neither here nor there. We're not here to talk about the Miami Heat. Nor does anyone want to talk about the Miami Heat because, yeah. But nah, man, I'm doing good. College basketball season's around the corner. Obviously, the World Series starts tomorrow. But basketball's back. I'm very happy that basketball's back. And how you doing, man?
Nah, I'm all right. Yeah, like you got World Series Game 1 coming up tomorrow. I'm kind of it's like a MLB fan's worst nightmare, unless you're a Yankee or Dodger fan. But at least like the two big powerhouses going at it. But of course, got to talk about the Spurs. Switching lanes a little bit. But yeah, so like they went 22-60 last year. They were 23rd when it came to points per game, and then opponent points per game, they were 24th. A very surprising stat that I saw about this team is that they were third in pace last year, which I thought, and I believe the year before for that it was a stat I didn't know, they were number one in pace. But I want to get your thoughts of kind of Wemby's first year and how like the Spurs team stacking up going into the season. By the time this video gets out, the Spurs may have already played their first game, but yeah, give me your thoughts and opinions on the Spurs and I guess Wemby's first year.
Wemby was unbelievable. I mean, not too many people surprised me. He led the league in blocks. He finished first in Rookie of the Year voting. He finished second Defensive Player of the Year voting. He averaged 21.5 points, 10.5 rebounds, 4 assists, despite the fact that no one could throw him an entry pass or no one could set him up properly offensively. I was hoping Trey Jones would step into that role a little bit last year. That unfortunately didn't happen as consistently as you wanted to. And then the Jeremy Sohan experiment where he was initiating offense and he was being like a primary creator for Wemby at the beginning of the season was just an unmitigated disaster. And so now, they went 22-60, which I was talking to you a little bit before we started. In my head, I knew San Antonio was bad last year, but it just never registered in my head that San Antonio was 22-60 bad. Like, if you finish with one more win than like the Portland Trailblazers after last, like that, you're in a bad spot. But obviously, when you have a generational prospect like Victor Wembanyama, it's not going to look bleak for very long, so to speak. And like Devin Vassell had a great season. I like Keldon Johnson. I think he can have a big season. And then, of course, this offseason they added Chris Paul. They added, Harrison Barnes as part of the 3-team trade with Chicago and Sacramento, and the DeMar DeRozan trade. And so, like, they have some pieces there. They drafted Stephon Castle, who I loved out of UConn, number 4 overall. I'm a little bit not disappointed. It's the wrong word, but I was hoping they would keep their pick. They traded it to Minnesota. I want to say it was number 8 overall, if I can remember correctly. They traded it to Minnesota for a future first-round pick and a future swap, I believe, in like the 2030, 2031 range. They drafted Rob Dillingham. I was hoping they'd keep that pick a little bit, just because it's like, you get flat draft, but you get another crack at the top 10, like you get, extra bites at the apple. And I was a little underwhelmed by the return with that. But again, that's neither here nor there. They did draft Harrison Ingram in the second round, who is a guy that I like a lot. He was a guy who was he improved as a 3-point shooter. He played at North Carolina this last year, and he also played at Stanford throughout his college career. Exceptional rebounder. They have him on a 2-way contract. And so, like, they have some pieces that I like Malachi Branham, Julian Champagny, like just, a few notable names. But obviously, this is Victor Wembanyama's team. Again, the fact that he averaged, 21.5 with 11 rebounds and 4 assists while leading the league in blocks with over 3.5 a game, like, despite not having a real point guard on his team, now he gets to play with one of the best, if not the best, or one of the best, I'd say, pure passers of this generation. Maybe the best, or one of the best ever. Like Chris Paul is an exceptional point guard in every sense of the word. That's why they call him the point god. And now he's playing with Victor Wembanyama while also mentoring Stephon Castle. So it's like it's a perfect world right there. Or not perfect world. It's the wrong word to use, but it's a very good scenario for a guy like Chris Paul and for guys like Wembanyama and Castle. So not very high on them last season outside of Wemby, but I think we're in line for a better season in 2024-25.
Yeah, I wanted to talk to you a little bit more about CP's impact. Obviously, he's 39. At some point during the season, he's going to turn 40. I wanted to ask you, because obviously he kind of walked into a situation like this before when he went to a young team that had low expectations, and in Oklahoma City for that 1 year. Obviously, it was a couple years ago and he was a little bit younger. But I wanted to ask you, how do you feel about CB3's impacts on this team? Do you think it's going to really unlock something with some of these guys? Like, I can only imagine like having like Wemby having somebody like Chris Paul who can still, at the very least, still get guys some great shots and great looks and probably get the most out of these guys. Like, I think Chris Paul's addition to the Spurs is probably going to like speak volumes, at least in more ways than one over the course of the season, especially with a lot of guys. Like, I feel like guys like Keldon Johnson and like Devin Vassell and a lot of guys will probably get some of the probably the best looks they've gotten over the course of their careers because of somebody like CP. But I want to get your thoughts on like Chris Paul's role on this team.
I at first, like when the move was made, I can't say I loved it. But then you think more about it. It's like, okay, what did he do for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's career? It was monumental for like him as a mentor, him being there to being like, all right, like this is how you like organize, and like he was a great mentor and a great leader. And he, one of my favorite sayings is leaders develop leaders. Like he did a great job developing a leader in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, which he's now since carried into, obviously we've seen the ascension of Oklahoma City. And them being probably the best team in the Western Conference, one of the best teams in the entire league. Like obviously those were over multiple years. And when Chris was there, it was like it was like 5 years ago. It was like in that bubble range when they were in the bubble and they played Houston in the playoffs and all that jazz. Like I think he did a great job mentoring Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Now he gets the opportunity to not only mentor Stephon Castle, Trey Jones, but like now he get like in some weird way he gets to mentor Victor Wembanyama. Like not that Victor Wembanyama doesn't know how to be a professional and doesn't know like the day of the life of being an NBA player, but like now you get a veteran leader like Chris Paul, and like Victor Wembanyama is the face of the franchise, barring none, like no question about it. He's one of the faces of the entire league. And now you get a guy like Chris Paul in there just to help him, build that, like continue to develop that part of just not like on the court, but off the court and stuff like that. But then you put him in a world where he knows how to set guys up. Being a point guard is a lost art. It just is. Like there's not many true point guards in the NBA today. There's a lot of combo guards. There's players who can score, but like there's not like many true point guards who are so adept at setting guys up and putting guys in positions to succeed and running an offense so fluidly to where like it just all works, it all gels, it all meshes. Chris Paul is one of those guys who can help orchestrate that. And with Victor Wembanyama, Victor Wembanyama is like what 9'5", like he 10 feet tall. Like he can help him in so many different ways, like getting him in the right positions, like you and all you got to do is throw it up to him. He's a ridiculously tall human being. He's gigantic. Like just throw it up to him. He's going to go catch it and he's going to do whatever he wants with it. Like that's just Victor Wembanyama to a T. And now you get a guy who can set you up and put you in those proper positions to succeed, whether it is in the pick and roll, whether it is, in the post, above the break, wherever you want Wemby wherever you want to plug him in. Now you get a guy like Chris Paul to help with that. And then in the Stephon Castle case, like it goes back to what I was saying about Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Like this is Shai Gilgeous or Stephon Castle said before the draft that he wants to be a point guard. Like that was his kind of his secondary role when he was at UConn. Like he wasn't like the primary initiator all the time, but like you could tell that there was some, playmaking chops, some point guard chops in there. In addition to, what he could do defensively, guarding the team's best player, and so on and so forth. Like that's what he did a lot at UConn. I expect him to be a really good two-way player at the NBA level. Obviously, that it's not going to come right away, but you get a guy like Chris Paul in there to help you. This is how you run an offense. This is how you, conduct certain things. And like, there's not very many players like that. And I think Chris Paul's addition to this team is so monumental because it's like, it's not even just Stephon Castle, even though he's, a rookie and a top 5 pick, but you also get to mentor a guy like Trey Jones, who's entering his age 25 season, who's still a young player, but like, Chris Paul is one of the smartest players ever on the court. Like he's a basketball savant, and he knows how to pick you apart and then which way. And like he's always got a bag of tricks up his sleeve that Stephon Castle, Trey Jones, Victor Wembanyama, like those guys can pick his brain a little bit and become smarter, not just smarter individually, but smarter collectively. Like that's something that's really, really important. And I think that's really important. Like you always need veterans on a basketball team just because they know the Jimmies and Joes. Like it's not always about the X's and O's, but the Jimmies and Joes. Like these guys know that stuff, and that's why they're veterans, and that's why they're so well respected in their profession. And I think that it's just such a good. It's only for $10.5 million, and so Chris Paul, like it's such a good addition that I think this team can really, potentially in 2 or 3 years. Like obviously, I don't think they're going to be contender this year. They're not in position to contend, but in 2, 3, 4 years with Wembanyama there, and they could potentially make trades or whatnot, and bolster their roster or whatever. Like I think at some point, whether it's a guy like Cass or Wembanyama or whomever, like they can look back and be like, wow, that was actually a really good addition because it helped me with this, this, and this, and that's really important. And that's why I think Chris Paul adds to this team, and I think it's just a really good, seamless fit.
Yeah, I can agree with you on that. I like the idea of bringing Chris Paul in, especially for a group of young guys like this. Like to all the points that you hit on, like Stephon Castle, like I feel for him. Like I believe when CP got there, SGA was in his second year, or yeah, it was like second or third year, something like that. But regardless of the fact, the very next season he really broke into his own. He averaged like 20 plus points, and I don't know if he was all-star that year, but regardless, that you kind of saw exactly what like CP kind of rubbed off onto him, So I feel like it could be the same thing for Castle, because I'm pretty sure it would be at the point, because I don't know if Chris Paul is going to be starting. I mean, I haven't seen like lineups or anything like that. I'd assume maybe to kind of give like the rookies and whatnot like a chance.
I would imagine. Just
Yeah,
based, I think he's. I don't think he's going to be playing like 20. I don't think he's going to be playing like 30 a night, but he's going to be a guy I think that gets a good 20 to 25, whether he's starting or not.
yeah, like I feel like, because at the same time, like even just thinking back to his days at OKC, like they had SGA playing the 2 guard next to him, and then obviously when CP got traded, they slid him back to the point. I can easily see something like that happening with Castle, unless like, they bring Castle off the bench for maybe like the first half of the season or whatnot. Like I feel like eventually there'll be a point in this season where Castle will start becoming a starter if he really is turning into the prospect a lot of people look at him to be. But also like the reason I like the CP signing, or like the acquisition anyway, is that like you look at the track record of big men as well that CP's played with. He's played with DeAndre Jordan, Blake Griffin, David West to shout him out, and like even like you would think he would have unlocked more of DeAndre Ayton when he was with Phoenix, but at the same time, it's like CP, especially when it comes to pick and roll partners, he really does a great job about like really like getting those guys in positions to do well. So I can only imagine Wemby like are like soaring past his numbers from last year, whether or not Chris was going to be on the team. But in any case, I think it's going to be very beneficial for this team overall. Somebody else I think would benefit a lot going into the season is Keldon Johnson, not necessarily with the CP acquisition, but Keldon before last year, he was a 22 point per game scorer, and he was a starter. And then It seemed like he came off the bench a lot more often last year, and obviously his numbers represented that. So I wanted to ask you, because I know they obviously they have a couple more forwards on this team now. Obviously bringing in Harrison Barnes, and like you said, you have Harrison Ingram, and then you got a couple other guys. Do you see Keldon Johnson starting this year? And then, so like, what's your opinion on Keldon, I guess, overall going into the season now?
I don't think he starts just because, or maybe he starts for a little bit. Because Vassell's out with an injury right now at the start of the season, so he may get some, starting run alongside like Sohan, alongside Harrison Barnes. I think he can be a potential sixth, seventh guy off the bench that can provide a scoring punch. He's athletic. That's kind of where I see his role at to begin this season, and then assuming he doesn't start for at least a portion of the season. Again, once Vassell gets back, I don't see him starting, barring another injury somewhere else. And so that's kind of where I see him at right now. I think he can be I think he could be an impactful scorer. Even when he's not getting as many minutes or not getting as many opportunities or whatever the case is, just an impactful bench piece. Because this team needs it. This team needs any kind of juice that they can get, and Keldon is just one of those guys who can provide that punch for him. I want to talk about Harrison Barnes for a bit, because that was an interesting acquisition, and I know why they did it. But I wasn't particularly high on Harrison Barnes as a player in Sacramento, only because he's getting to the early to mid 30s, and I think he's dropped off defensively as a player. Not a bad shooter, but to me, whenever I see him, there's a little left to be desired. But I do think he can find a second gear playing with Wembanyama and whatnot. But another reason why I want to mention this is because what else they got back. I don't know why the fuck the Kings did this. I'm just going to preface this by saying, I know why, but I also don't know why they did this. They traded Harrison Barnes, but they also traded an unprotected 2031 swap to San Antonio. San Antonio has been a team over time that has done a good job collecting swaps. They collected a swap in this trade, obviously the one that I mentioned earlier with Dillingham. They collected swaps. It's a way for a team to escape trading a first round pick, and obviously the teams who are trading these swaps away, it doesn't violate the stepping rule. And so you can trade as many swaps in consecutive years as you want to. And at the same time, I don't know if teams value swaps like this, but the Kings traded a 2031 swap. Yes, they did get Harrison Barnes back, but De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis are going to be 34 by the time that swap is up. DeMar DeRozan is going to be retired. Yeah, you want to talk about an asset to add to your treasure chest. That could be really fucking valuable.
Yeah.
In a few years, depending on how that situation plays out. And so when I saw the trade at first, and I wrote about this for the site, you can go check it out. I was just I don't know if I would have done this if I was Sacramento. This isn't the Sacramento Kings, portion of the point, but I found that to be very interesting. I just wanted to mention that because it's just again, San Antonio's done a sneakily great job of just collecting these different swaps from teams. I want to say, I don't remember who they exactly have it from. I'd have to go back and look it up, but they have at least 5 or 6 in just future years that they can potentially use. And yeah, I get it. It's not like an outright pick, but it absolutely can be if your team stinks.
Yeah.
And so it's just I don't know if I would have done this if I was Sacramento trying to, you're acquiring a 34 or 35-year-old DeMar DeRozan, but that's not, again, neither here nor there.
I would ask
I don't think. Go on. What were you gonna say?
I was gonna say I would ask you, is Popovich still the GM for the Spurs as well as the coach?
I don't think he's the GM here. Let me look this up.
Because I know there was a point he was, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't believe it is. No, it's Brian Wright. That's right.
Okay, because in any case, it's it's a really, obviously really good move for San Antonio, really bad potentially for Sacramento, but Sometimes you kind of need moves like
Actually,
that.
wait, no, he is the president of ops. Never mind.
Okay, all right. So he still has some say in
Yeah.
how like certain moves.
Oh, for sure. I
I
mean, he
mean, I
would
guess
have a say anyway.
yeah. Like, I
He
feel
would
like
have
my
a say
point.
anyway.
I feel like my point still stands when it comes to like I feel like especially like where they're at. I guess any team like you kind of need not necessarily to get lucky, but like sometimes there's gonna be a move when like
Yeah.
when you look at like the timeline of teams trying to get back to where they want to be, and you look in like how like I feel like every team has this like how did they manage to pull this trade off, or like what was this team thinking when they traded said piece to them, and now look where they are, that kind of thing. So I mean, in any case, like yeah, San Antonio can hang on to that, or even in like between now and 2031, trade that pick and then land a superstar somewhere.
Once
Depending.
2029 comes and if Sacramento's bad, because I
I
mean, again, we are talking about the Sacramento Kings, Jeremiah. So anything's on the table. But again, I know I'm introducing like a whole different discussion to this, but like I think it is important to note that like, they actually got this potentially again. It's all potential. Like it doesn't mean it will actually happen, but like they got potentially a really good asset
yeah, like
that they
an
can
absolute
use to
gem.
facilitate a Wembanyama trade, or that they can just keep as like a potential lottery pick or whatever, and in future years that they can use. I mean, Wembanyama is going to be in the midst of his prime by that point, so who knows how good San Antonio is going to be. So I don't know. It's just something to think about, because it's like, yeah, Harrison Barnes is like a good veteran, and he's again another guy who can provide veteran leadership for like Keldon Johnson, for Devin Vassell, some of those other guys in the wing room, like Jeremy Sohan. Like he can be really valuable for a year or two in that sense. But I don't think that's the reason why they made the trade.
I think the pick, yeah, for sure, was a lot more lucrative.
There's some influence, because again, it is the Sacramento Kings, and that core. It's not going to be young.
Yeah,
assuming they're still there.
I mean,
but it's something to know.
Yeah, a lot can change. A lot can change between now and the start of the new decade. I will ask.
Absolutely.
Speaking of the future and the coming years, like obviously Popovich, he's been the head coach and been a part of the Spurs for decades now. I wanted to ask you, how much longer, in your opinion, do you think Pop has in terms of coaching this team?
As long as Wembanyama's no. I mean, he's just signed a 5-year extension last year, I believe. And so he sees this generational prospect walking in the building from a different country, and he's just like, "Ooh, let me get my hands on that." I did it for years with Duncan. I mean, obviously Duncan is American, but like did it for 20 years with one of the best big men of all time. Now you get Wembanyama.
You get a chance to potentially do it again.
Yeah, like he's gonna, as long as he's in existence, as long as he's living in my head, Greg Popovich is going to be the coach. Obviously, at some point, you lose the desire, you lose the passion, but shit, man, they're going to be winning in, potentially 2, 3, 4 years. Like they're going to be one of the best teams in the league if they have this guy on their team.
Yeah. I guess also I was going to say between now, do you see the Spurs getting another ring with Pop, so holding the reins,
It's hard to project that far into the future, but again, you have this guy on your team. It feels like within the next few years, like again, I'm not pegging that to be this year. Chickster, I know you're watching. But shit, in 3 years, depending on what they do in the off seasons and stuff, and the deadlines and everything, and I don't know, I can't rule it out.
Yeah.
What if Stephon Castle just hits and becomes, one of the best young point guards in the entire league? What if some of these other Devin Vassell has already ascended into like a really good player, but like, what if there's another guy that comes along that hits? Oh, and then you could potentially parlay a couple of these guys into, player X. Like, obviously, yeah, you're not trying to fast track it because some teams just mess that up by doing that. But at the same time, like, you want to win at some point soon with Wembanyama on your team. And so I'm not saying that, it's hard to project titles, 2, 3, 4 years into the future because so many
What
different
can
things can
happen?
happen from a year-to-year basis, let alone 3 or 4 years down the line. But I'm not. If you told me the Spurs would win a title in 3 or 4 years, I wouldn't be surprised. Not one bit.
Yeah.
Depending on what the team looks like, not one bit.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of things can happen when it comes to that kind of thing. Like, I mean, if you were to look at the start of the decade and then say like a bunch of like the blockbuster moves took place, like I wouldn't think like if I went into the time machine, I wouldn't think James Harden would have been on the Clippers right now, or
Right.
like Chris Paul's a Spur and that kind of thing. But I
Usually
guess
you have to go through a heartbreak. Sorry to interrupt. Usually you have to go through like at least one heartbreak if you're a team before you get over that hump, before
yeah,
you get over the top, just so you could develop that mental fortitude, get a taste of what it's actually like. Like obviously, Harrison Barnes has won a title. Chris Paul unfortunately hasn't, but he's been in the playoffs so many different times. Like there's guys who have playoff experience, but like this is still a young team with like Sohan, with Trey Jones, with Keldon Johnson, with like most of these guys haven't gotten a taste of what being in the playoffs or being a team who goes deep into the playoffs. Like they don't have that experience yet, and so usually you have to go through at least one or two heartbreaks. Get that little taste, and then you capitalize on that window once it comes. So like again, I don't expect it to happen this year, probably not next year. But again, if you were to tell me it happened in 3, 4, 5 years, I wouldn't scoff at you. I would be like, "What? You're crazy!" Like I wouldn't do that.
yeah.
Because you have this 7'5" alien on your team who is just going to continue to get better over time. Like at some point, yeah, you want to win and you want to get that taste.
I will ask kind of something to I guess look out for going into the season for the Spurs. Like I mentioned earlier, they ranked 23rd in points per game, and then they also ranked 24 in opponent points per game. I wanted to ask you, which side of the ball do you see San Antonio kind of progressing more in this season? Because I feel like they're better than a 22 win team, especially with the guys they brought in. But I just want to ask, where do you expect some sort of improvement on which side of the ball?
I think offensively, just because you have Chris Paul, but I also think with the infusion of like Stephon Castle, for example, uh, it helps you out defensively a little bit. But like Chris Paul isn't necessarily a plus defender at this time of his career. Neither is Harrison Barnes, neither is some of these other guys. But I would say, like, obviously, Wemby defensively. Like, I can't say I'm probably a little bit lower on Wembanyama defensively than the consensus, but at the same time, he is probably the best shot blocker in the league. Again, he was the number one shot, like, he led the league in shot blocking as a rookie, and he's only going to continue to get better and stronger, and you know, this, that, and the other. Even though there were different times last season where it was just like, all right, that interesting how that team is, hunting Wembanyama. Um, wasn't always the case, especially toward late in the season, but there were just very like few glimpses of it, and that just something that kept in the back of my mind, especially in the pick and roll. But he's still an exceptional defender, especially doing it as a rookie, given his size and whatnot. But I think offensively, just again, you have Chris Paul, you have more spacing to some extent with Harrison Barnes in there. I think you'll get better seasons from Johnson. I think you'll get a good season from Vassell when he's healthy. I just think there's more collective improvement in that area, in addition to Wembanyama. So I think offensively, I see them progressing more there, especially since, like you said, 23rd in points per game. Like they were 26th in adjusted like offense per 100 possessions last year. Like I think that they become like a middle of the pack offense at the very least.
Yeah, I think offensively they're going to take a little bit of a jump too. I think just for the part of Chris Paul, I think he's going to get the most out of these guys. I still think CP in a starting capacity can still get you like 12 and 10, even if that's in like the twilights of his career. I think if he's starting, I still think he can at least be productive on that side of the ball. Especially like getting guys open shots, and he's probably gonna get himself 5 assists a game just by lobbying up to Wembanyama all the time. So
Exactly.
I think in any case the team's gonna be fun to watch offensively. For I guess like as the outlook for this team, with their season starting tonight, do you like where do you have them? Like obviously they won 22 games last year. Like, um, I feel like me personally, I feel like they'll like kind of not necessarily soar past that, but I feel like they're more in like the north of 25 wins. Excuse me, but I want to see like where your head's at when it comes to San Antonio going into the year. Do you see them like do you see them as a playoff team? Do you see them as another bottom feeder in the NBA? Like where's your head at? Where is your head at there?
I think they get around 30 wins, 30 to 35. I do have them as of right now as like a 12, 13 seed in the West, only because again, like the West is so good. I don't know what to do with. I think I have them as like a 12 seed, if I can remember correctly.
Okay.
But at the same time, it's like there's so many good teams. I really want to include them in the play-in, but I don't know if they get there. I think they can for sure, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if they did. But I'm not there yet. Not there yet. I think they can, but it's like if you were to like Nerf gun to the head, I don't think they make the play.
I could see a situation where like they'll will be hot for stretches and there may be that optimism there
For
where
sure.
could get there. Kind of like um what is the team? I think it may have been like Orlando maybe a couple years ago where it's like, oh, those guys like, hit a stride and then like, they just fall off hard over the course of the season. But I feel there could be the optimism there that like fans know like, oh, we're not going to make too much noise. But hey, like we're around there. So, I mean, hey, we can't count out the team out just yet. Like I feel like the leap Wemby could have as well as like some of the other additions and like they have the potential to make a little bit of noise, but even if they're just around, even if they don't make it ultimately, if they're around, I think that's just a good sign. But obviously, like in simple terms, like you want to be better than you were last year.
I think they should. If they're not better than they were last year from a record, but like something's gotten catastrophically wrong.
It's a problem. Yeah,
A problem. You can't be. It's hard to be worse than 22 and 60.
yeah.
I think they hover around that 30. Like I don't think they make like a grand leap to like 35, 40 wins just because of the conference they play in. But I do think they get around, 30 to 35 wins.
Yeah, I think there will be a lot to like about this team, especially I think they may get like some very not necessarily surprising wins, but like, oh, they beat that team. Like they'll probably be a couple of like I guess quote unquote upsets for them.
They
They'll
had
win.
that. They happened to them last year. They beat Denver in Denver at one point toward the end of the season, where it was like, oh, like
Like
this team
those
might
like
stink,
those
but
little flashes for sure.
yeah,
Okay. But yeah, like I guess ultimately I feel like this Spurs team is gonna be fun to watch, regardless of like how like I guess regardless of how we feel about this team going into the future. But just because of Wemby and then like just his dynamic on the court. But I know we're coming up a little bit on time, so Matt, I wanted to give you the floor. See if there was anything else, you have any hot takes, any opinions on anybody we haven't mentioned already, anything like that. The floor is yours when it comes to the San Antonio Spurs, my friend.
I think I saw some good things from Blake Wesley in the preseason. I had pre-draft stock on him a few years ago, so that's cool. Julian Champagny, hope he has a breakout season. I'm just looking up and down that roster. I hope Harrison Ingram, another guy that I had some pre-draft stock in this year, this most recent cycle. I hope he does well on a two-way contract. I don't have any other than just like I just want to see Wembanyama be like. I just want to see him continue to be good. I don't have any worries about that, obviously, but they might be my favorite non-play-in team to watch.
Okay.
If that's if assuming they don't make the play, they very well may make the play. Like I don't want to say my favorite bad team to watch because I don't know if they're like bad.
Your
They were
favorite
bad last year.
Yeah. Your favorite team on the outside looking in.
Right. Yeah,
Good.
that's a much better way of phrasing it.
Keeping it friendly, yeah.
Yeah, like, and it's because of Wemby.
Yeah.
And then it's also going to be like, ooh, how does Chris Paul do this?
Yeah.
How does Stephon Castle, like, again, Stephon Castle was a guy that I loved coming out of the draft. So it's
lot
like,
of
ooh, how are these guys, how do they incorporate themselves in this context over an 82 game season?
Yep, a lot of questions that will be answered over the course of the year. Spurs season starts tonight, and there's a lot of optimism around this team. It seems like that's like kind of like I guess my biggest takeaway from this preview. But guys, that is gonna do it for the San Antonio Spurs season preview. Make sure you guys go check him out. I feel like Wemby is going to be box office. In my opinion, he should have won Defensive Player of the Year last year as a rookie, but that's neither here or there at this point. It's a new season, a new
Should
NBA
have been
year.
Bam.
Should have been Bam.
Should have been Bam.
At some point. Yeah, see. Guys, we hope you guys enjoyed the San Antonio Spurs preview. Be sure to show any and all support. Joe, make sure to go check out vendetta-sportsmedia.com for all your things NBA, for all your favorite sports. Check us out on YouTube at Vendetta Sports Media. Check out all the other NBA previews. There's so much work that goes into the site as well as the previews, and like we appreciate any and all support. But that's gonna do it for me, guys. That's been Matt Hanifan. I've been Jiarmani DePena, and we'll see you guys next time. Take it easy.